Hi folks! We have another great sword review today, and it's one that I'm really happy to be able to review. This is a sword that changed Skallagrim's mind. We'll link to his video that he recently put up. It's a sword made by swordmaker LKChen that I'm really fortunate to be able to get to review. It's from one of his American sword line, and it's the US 1860 Cavalry saber. Some people say the light cavalry saber. That's not really the case, since there wasn't a distinction about it being light cavalry. I'm going to take this out of the scabbard because the scabbard is making a lot of noise. I'll be right up front. This is one of the best reproduction military period cavalry sabers available. There's a problem with cavalry sabers, or basically military pattern sabers, in the reproduction market because the antique swords are relatively inexpensive. You can pick them up in some cases for, between $200 and $400. For the most part, makers have not been reproducing them, at least not very faithfully. So you can still find to this day hundreds and hundreds of reproductions from either Indian or Chinese makers, but unfortunately they're pretty low quality. They are not very highly accurate, and they don't handle anything like the original. Sometimes they'll look pretty good. Sometimes they'll bear a lot of resemblance, and they'll sit very nicely at the hip. So if you want to do any reenacting, that's fine. They're oftentimes can be made to the quality that they're not going to fall apart if they're picked up and swung around, but that's kind of where the resemblances between them and the original antiques lay. However, only in recent years has there been any attention to detail to trying to make faithful reproductions to originals. If you wanted it before, you'd have to go to a custom smith, and it would be very, very expensive to try and get a high quality, faithful reproduction of a military period saber, even from the 19th century. It was basically cheaper and more affordable, more economical to just go and buy an antique. This represents one of maybe two or three good, high quality, off the shelf reproduction models of those. And it's the only one that's an American sword that I'm aware of. So the 1860 is a pretty famous sword. It's one of the swords that was featured by both the North and the South in the American Civil War. So much like its predecessor, the m1840, it's based on French swords. So it comes from the family of the French 1822 light cavalry saber. There's the light cavalry saber, and also the line troopers saber. But this is the 1840, sometimes called the wristbreaker, is a slightly heavier version than this. They look very, very similar. The 1860 that came out as an improvement and a replacement, it started production very slightly before 1860, so 1856 they started rolling out with the experimental models, and then by 1870, 1858, 59, they started coming out in a couple thousands. Some of them made it to places like Virginia before the war broke out, and then Ames, the company out of Massachusetts, made them probably 2/3 of the total number of units that were in use during the American Civil War, in their hundreds of thousands. So this remained a very popular and very well-used model across the Civil War period, and for decades afterwards, probably through the American-Spanish War period. So it's a really neat type of very long saber. It features the Montmorency type of double fullered design that has been faithfully reproduced in this LKChen original. It's also that has been reproduced by LKChen. It features what's typical of military sabers of the period, which is complex distal taper. So it starts off with a very thick ricasso, in this case over 8 millimeters here at the shoulders, and then tapers and tapers and tapers. It has a bit of a false edge here just after the fuller, so we're really getting down to just like 2 or so millimeters here in the foible of the blade. It's got a brass handguard with 3 rings to protect it, so a nice half basket, and a wire-wrapped leather guard over. It would have originally been either bone or wood. I'm pretty sure that there's wood under there, which feels very, nice in the hand. It's kind of ergonomic style grip, and a nice little leather washer here at the throat to keep it from banging on the scabbard too much. And for a second, I am going to look at the scabbard because the scabbard isn't really to be ignored. My buddy AlienTude looked at this recently, and this is again one of the more faithfully designed scabbards. You know, a lot of times you're paying good money and you're not even getting a scabbard with a sword. Not only is this a scabbard, it's a very well done scabbard. The drag is put together well. There aren't any marks. It's all very nicely done across the length of the body of it. Even the time has been done to braze the little suspension rings here. The interior is wood lined, which is consistent with how they were originally done, and the throat has two interior pegs which line up with the fuller to keep the sword into position. So these were a little robust. Again, officers may have had wood over leather over wood lined scabbards because they were able to afford to buy them. But for troopers, you're going to have metal scabbards, which are a little bit more durable, make a lot of noise, bang around. This is how you do your saber rattling once upon a time. But just very good. I'm sure everyone wants to see how this handles, so let's go out in the back and take it cutting for a second. So you can see that this performs admirably. This is a very faithfully reproduced blade that performs in the way that you would expect a military saber of the 19th century to be able to perform. So you're able to conduct your swordsmanship just the way you want. How sharp is it? So you were able to see me up here. Do I even have anything to test it on? So how sharp is it? Let's see. Very sharp. So that begs a question, and this is a perfect time to discuss how this was used and the misunderstanding for military sabers, and especially how swords were used in the American Civil War and swords of this period. Were they sharpened or weren't they? So I have here my officer's sword. This was also made by AIM, so the same company that mass manufactured the 1860. So this is an NCO sword, and it was made to 1862, 1863. So this is a Civil War period sword, and it does not have a final edge on it. So this came out of the factory, and it does not have what's called a service sharpening on it. It wasn't sharpened in the field. I've done test cutting with this blade, and because of the geometry, you can still do a lot of damage with it, but it was never put on a grindstone in the field and brought to razor sharp. Most antiques that we find have this level of sharpening on. Not most, but a large number of them are like this, and that has led many people to believe that this is the way that swords were intended to be used. Writers of the time, retired military personnel, veterans from the American Civil War lament that not more attention was given to the training of swordsmen of America and the Army, and that because it was the maintenance of these swords was left up to the unit level rather than centralized, that swords were oftentimes not brought to final sharpness as you would find in Europe. And as a result, the weapons were oftentimes not in a state ready to be used to the fullest extent. That didn't always happen. So sometimes they were sharpened and were used to devastating effect. Other times they were not. They were sent to from the factory like this. And if you hit someone like this, you still could do significant damage. It's a misunderstanding that swords of the day were intended to be used as percussive weapons. You can hit someone and injure them just with the force of the blow, even from your arm, not necessarily from horseback. That is not a sword's purpose. A sword is designed to do damage by cleaving through the target. That's doubly so when you have a curved blade like this with very, very thin tip. All of it is designed to help aid in severing fibrous material, flesh, bone, tissue. And there's lots of accounts we have from surgeons from the Civil War period that talk about the grievous wounds that were caused by both straight swords and by sabers. So even if we do have surviving swords, and we have written accounts of people who lamented that some swords were not sharpened, that was never by design. By design, swords were issued blunt and then later intended to be sharpened. Sometimes it didn't occur. In the cases where it did occur, the swords could be used as fearsome weapons. When they were not brought to final sharpness, that sometimes was to the detriment of the unit's ability to fight with them fully. This blade, as created by LKChen, shows the full capabilities of a light cavalry saber from the Civil War period, and it is truly a spectacular thing to be held, whether you're swinging from the shoulder or whether you're giving light cuts in the fashion of the swordsmanship at the time that's derived from earlier British traditions like Roath and Angelo. In all cases, this is a tremendous addition to the swords we have available to us. I really hope that they continue to make them like this. There's almost nothing I can recommend that be improved upon it. Well, the only thing I'd like to see improved is that he put some type of a maker's mark on it so it could not be easily forged, because right now this is so good that it would be very easy to age it up and make it look like an antique. I don't want to see that happen. Otherwise, this if you got this in your hands, this would be one of one of many different variations of a trooper's model of 1860 sword. For instance, the secondary fuller ends within the larger fuller. That was seen on originals. It wasn't the most common configuration. The primary fuller is a little shallow. Again, I measured it at about 8 millimeters. Sometimes they're up to 10 millimeters, but this is all within variation. So this is a good representative on a spectrum of swords that came out from a variety of manufacturers in the period. It's he's knocked it out of the park, especially for the price range, the budget that is currently listed at. So right now, go and get yourself one of these if you're interested in these type of swords. If you have an interest in swords from the American Civil War, from military style saber at all, definitely can heartily endorse this offering from LKChen. Until next time, guys, take care.